The diner smelled of coffee and fried bacon, the kind of smell that clung to clothes and memories. The morning rush had ended, leaving only a few regulars sipping from chipped mugs and reading newspapers. Lily moved between tables with quiet grace, carrying plates that felt heavier than they should have. Her uniform was faded from too many washes, and her shoes squeaked on the tiled floor. Every step reminded her that she was working more hours than her body wanted to give. She smiled anyway, because kindness was the only thing she could still afford. At the corner table sat a tall man in a black leather jacket, with tattoos curling around his hands like smoke. His motorcycle gloves lay beside his plate, next to a half-eaten sandwich. Looked like trouble and peace at the same time, silent eyes that had seen too much. He had been coming in for weeks, never saying much, just ordering coffee black and breakfast heavy. The locals whispered that he rode with a biker group known for fighting anyone who crossed them. Lily didn't believe it. He always left a good tip and thanked her softly before leaving. This time, as she walked over to clear his plate, she noticed he hadn't finished his food. She hesitated, looking at the fries, cooling beside his untouched toast. Her stomach twisted not for herself, but for her little girl waiting at home. She had promised her a warm dinner tonight, but the bills on her counter said otherwise. She tried to ignore the thought, but before she could stop herself, she said softly, "Sir, can I take the leftovers for my daughter?" The room went still. The old man by the counter lowered his paper. The cook stopped wiping the grill. Even the jukebox seemed to pause. Lily's face turned red the moment the words left her mouth. She shook her head quickly. "Sorry, forget I said that. I shouldn't have asked." The biker didn't answer right away. He looked at her for a long second, then pushed the plate toward her gently. "Take it." She blinked, surprised. "I can't, sir, it's fine." He interrupted, his voice calm. "How old's your daughter?" "7," she whispered. He nodded, then said, "Wait here." He stood, walked to the counter and pulled out a few bills from his wallet. His voice carried across the room loud, enough for everyone to hear. "Pack her something fresh, not leftovers." The cook stared, unsure if he was serious. The biker turned his eyes sharp. "Do it." The cook nodded, moving fast. Within minutes he filled 2 boxes with hot food, pancakes, fries and pie. The biker took 1 box, handed the other to Lily and said, "She deserves warm food, not scraps." Her throat tightened as she tried to thank him, but no words came. He placed a folded bill beneath her tip jar and said softly, "No mum should ever have to ask." When he left the diner, the roar of his motorcycle filled the silence he left behind. Lily opened the box later and found more than food. Inside was an envelope with money and a note written in rough handwriting, "For your daughter, so she never has to ask again." The next morning, the same biker returned, but this time he wasn't alone. 10 motorcycles lined the front of the diner. All of them men like him, rough faces, quiet strength. They ordered breakfast, filled the room with laughter, and when they left, every one of them dropped cash into Lily's jar. One of them said, "The boss told us about you. Your family now." From that day, the diner stayed busier than ever. Every time Lily looked at the door and heard engines outside, she smiled, knowing that somewhere in the world, a stranger with a kind heart was still looking out for her and her little girl. The next morning, the diner was busier than ever. Word had spread across town about the biker who had quietly changed a single mother's life. Lily moved between tables, trying to hide her surprise at how full the place had become. Regulars brought friends, strangers stopped by to order coffee and ask if the story was true. She never said much, just smiled softly and said, "People can surprise you when you least expect it." By noon, the rumble of engines rolled through the parking lot again. The same biker from before walked in, but this time more than a dozen others followed. All of them wore jackets stitched with the same insignia, a roaring eagle wrapped around a wheel. The crowd went silent, watching as they filled the seats at the back booth. Lily froze for a moment, wondering if something was wrong, but when the biker caught her eye, he smiled. The same calm, steady look as before. He said quietly, "Morning, miss, mind if we sit in your section?" She nodded, her voice a little shaky. Of course, the men ordered simple things, burgers, eggs, black coffee. The cook worked fast, his hands trembling slightly at first, but the sound of laughter soon replaced the tension. They weren't there to cause trouble. They were there because one of their own had seen something worth protecting. When everyone had finished eating, the biker called Lily over again. He handed her another envelope, smaller this time, and said, "This isn't charity, it's a thank you. You reminded a few hard men what decency looks like." She tried to give it back, but he shook his head firmly. "Keep it. There's more kindness in your tired smile than most of us." Ever found on the road before he left, he said something that stayed with her forever. "Next time you see someone struggling, don't look away. Sometimes all it takes is one brave word to change everything." She nodded, her eyes wet, but her voice steady. "I won't forget," he smiled. "Then you've already learned what matters." That night after closing, she sat by the window with her daughter, watching the headlights fade into the distance. She opened the envelope and found a patch with their symbol and a note that read, "You've got family on the road now if you ever need it." She placed the patch beside her daughter's bed, like a small promise that the world could still be kind. Years later, people still told the story of the waitress who asked for leftovers and the biker who answered with generosity, not anger. They called it the day a simple act turned a diner into a family and reminded everyone that sometimes the roughest souls carry the softest hearts. Days later, the little diner by the highway had become a landmark for something more than food. People started calling it the place where kindness happened. Lily tried to keep working as she always had, but strangers now stopped her to shake her hand. Some brought flowers, some brought letters. One woman said, "I came here because I wanted to meet the person who reminded people that help still exists." Lily smiled shyly, saying, "I didn't remind anyone. I just asked for leftovers." One chilly evening, when rain pattered softly against the windows, Lily was closing up when she heard the distant sound of engines. The sound grew louder until headlights filled the parking lot. She stepped outside and saw the same biker standing in the rain, a leather jacket over his shoulders and a brown paper bag in his hand. He smiled the same quiet smile she remembered and said, "Sorry to drop in late. Figured your daughter might need dessert." She laughed, shaking her head. "You've already done enough." He looked serious. "You didn't hear the rest of the story, did you?" She frowned. "What story?" he said. "The day you asked for leftovers, I had just buried my mother. She used to work nights in a diner too. Never asked anyone for help, even when she needed it. When you spoke that day, I saw her again. I couldn't let you walk away the same way she did." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't know what to say. The biker handed her the bag. Inside were cookies shaped like hearts. He said softly, "They're not from me. They're from the guys, the brothers who come here every weekend now. We all decided if one of us eats good, everyone eats good." Months passed and the diner changed completely. The bikers came regularly, helping repaint the walls, fixing broken chairs and bringing groceries for single parents in town. The townspeople who had once avoided them now waved when they passed by. Lily's daughter began calling them her uncles, and they never minded. On Christmas Eve, the diner lights glowed warm against the snow. Outside, rows of motorcycles lined the street, and inside, laughter filled the air. Lily stood behind the counter watching her daughter handing cookies to the bikers. One of them lifted the little girl onto his shoulders, saying proudly, "She's our lucky charm." Biker, who had started it all, stood by the door watching quietly. Lily walked over and said, "You turned this place into something bigger than I ever dreamed." He smiled, shaking his head. "You did that when you asked one small question. Sometimes that's how everything begins." That night, as the bikers left one by one, the road shimmered with light from their tail lamps. Lily looked at the sign above the diner window. It once said, "Open 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now it said, "Open hearts serve forever." She smiled softly, knowing the world could still change in the simplest ways. Years passed and the diner became more than just a stop on a lonely highway. It turned into a symbol of hope for anyone who ever felt unseen. The story of the waitress and the biker spread from one town to another, shared by truck drivers, families, and travelers who stopped by for a cup of coffee and left with something warmer than caffeine in their hearts. Lily still worked behind the counter, though her hair had silver streaks now. Her daughter Emily helped on weekends, greeting customers. with the same gentle smile her mother once wore. The photo of the biker crew hung proudly on the wall right above the register, under a sign that read, "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when you need them." One summer afternoon. The sound of engines echoed again down the road. Lily stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron, and froze. The same man stood there, though older, his beard a little grayer, his jacket a little more worn. Around him were fewer riders this time, but their smiles carried the same loyalty. He walked toward her, saying softly, "Heard the place got famous." She laughed, shaking her head. "I'd call it blessed." He smiled. "I guess that's fair." He sat at his old table and ordered the same thing as always. Black coffee and a sandwich. Emily brought it to him, curious and bold. She said, "Mom says you saved her life." He looked at the girl for a long moment, then said quietly, "No kid, she saved mine." The diner fell quiet for a second before laughter filled it again. Later that evening, when the place emptied and the sun dipped low, painting the world in amber light, he said to Lily, "I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm not much for talking, but there's something you should know. After my mother died, I didn't think I had anyone left. You gave me back faith in people. You didn't just change me, you changed all of us." Lily's eyes glistened and she whispered, "You did the same for me." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what kindness does, it circles back." When he stood to leave, she tried to hand him his bill. He refused, pushing a small envelope across the counter instead. She opened it after he rode away. Inside was a letter and a key. The letter read, "For you and Emily." The key opens the garage behind the diner. I bought it in your name. Thought it was time you had your own place to build dreams. Signed, Jake. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she ran outside, but the motorcycles were already gone, their engines fading into the horizon. She held the key tight to her chest, knowing she would never forget the sound of that promise. Years later, the diner expanded into a community kitchen, serving free meals every Sunday. Lily named it Miles of Kindness. Every new customer who asked about the story got the same answer from Emily. It started with a question and ended with a family. When people asked Lily why she kept the photo of Jake and his crew right by the door, she always said, "Because every time I look at it, I'm reminded that sometimes the toughest hearts carry the gentlest souls, and one act of grace can travel farther than any road ever could." If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.